Welcome back to another episode of Behind the Tune, everyone. Super excited to have you with us today listening and watching because we have a very insightful and important episode ahead of us. Sitting down with me today is Mitch Wilson, the Managing Director of the Australian Festival Association, the main representative body for music festivals in Australia. The AFA have been on the forefront of all issues and topics relating to music festivals, having produced so many positive outcomes for the live music industry since they began in 2018. The AFA continue to bring awareness through the various current initiatives with focus areas around advocacy, growth, unification, and elevation. Within this episode, Mitch and I discussed the recent Splendor cancellation, policing and drugs surrounding festivals, funding for festivals and live music, local support, and a host of other important issues. A conversation that could go on for hours, but we try to touch on as many points as possible. As usual, make sure you share around with your friends, like and subscribe if you're on YouTube, and follow and rate the podcast on Spotify. Happy listening, everyone. I think to start off, how did the AFA start, and sort of what was your motivation behind starting something like the AFA?
Yeah, so I actually wasn't involved at the very beginning.
Right, okay.
But there was 5 festival organisers that got together in response to the former Premier, Gladys Berejiklian. She tried to regulate festivals out of existence by just bringing in like stricter liquor licensing laws, and it was mainly in response to a couple of deaths that occurred from MDMA use, and there was the issues with DEFCON and other festivals at that period of time, which when the government tried to, crack down, the festival organisers were like, oh, we actually need to sort of band together and fight collectively because we can't do this individually. And also government just would rather talk to the industry association rather than, 20 different festival organisers and try and figure out what the industry's position is. So, yeah, that was sort of the catalyst. And then once it got formed, a whole bunch of other festivals were like, no, we want to be a part of this. We believe in like the, collective strength of us being together and fighting against this. And that rolled into COVID. So there was just even more of a need for, a representative body association of festival organisers to really, be the voice for the industry. And I've personally been in this role almost 2 years. It'll be 2 years in August. And my predecessor was the sort of original managing director, and so it's been a tough few years, and I think hopefully we're gonna see a bit of some of those challenges easing in the next little while, but it's just going to be a rough couple of summers, I think.
You sort of jumped into it at the craziest time post COVID with everything that's sort of going on. How's been managing that landscape for the last two and a bit years? Yeah,
well, I think it just keeps changing. We got out of the lockdowns in like the end of 2021, and all the festival organisers were like, great, no more restrictions. We just want to get back to doing what we do best, like putting on our festivals and events, and hopefully people would come back. But then we ran into all those like really bad wet weather events. Some of the festivals had to cancel because of flooding, or their, site was totally underwater. We saw things like Splendor in the mud happen. And just in that moment when we were hoping for people to like come back and, enjoy festivals again, I think that sort of put a bit of a dampener on people's experiences. And then just, cost of living challenges when the wars, sort of started, and the flow-on impacts that's just had to everyone's back pockets. They just don't really have as much cash as they used to, which is also impacting festivals. So it has been a bit of a perfect storm since COVID to just really make it difficult for us to get back into it.
Do you reckon it's going to continue like that? Because you said it's going to be a rough couple of summers. Do you reckon it's going to continue for the next, what's your sort of outlook on that?
Yeah, well, I think definitely the costs have gone up so much over the last couple of years when it comes to everything that, takes to put on a festival. So the venues, even suppliers like fencing and sound and lighting and stages and even just transporting stuff around, particularly for touring festivals, like everything just costs way more, 30 to 40% increases we've seen in some cases. And we hope that's going to ease now that we're seeing sort of inflation ease up and, the cost of living challenges that people have been facing sort of slowly easing, and hopefully that'll have a flow-on effect to festival organisers to make it a little bit, not as of a huge increase in costs, but the damage is still being done, so it'll take a while for everything to stabilise. But the flip side of that is like we've also seen a huge change in how particularly young people are buying tickets. So, they're buying tickets late. They are not buying tickets to certain events, and there's just been a major shift in sort of what people are looking for. And I think that'll just take a couple of years for, trial and error, see what events are going well, see what aren't, and to really sort of understand, okay, what is working, what's the offering that people are looking for, and then trying to deliver that. And, hopefully the ticket sales will come with it. But yeah.
That's a good point you bring up, the sort of the later ticket sales now. I think things like tick sales sort of come in and made reselling a bit more of a viable option. I want to touch on that in a minute, but you mentioned Splendour in the sort of mud in 2022, was it? Splendour had didn't they have a sort of really wet event as well a few years back as well? And I'm not sure when, maybe it was in the 2010s. But why do you think that wet weather event didn't have as much impact on the festival as the one that just went by?
Oh, I think because it was the first one back after COVID, and it was probably the first big festival that came back in its, usual form. There was a couple of others that sort of had to change how they did things because of COVID restrictions, and that Splendour in 2022 was probably the first one. And it also just gets a lot of media attention just because of its size. So, all the papers, all the radio are there. So when the first day got cancelled because of the flooding, it just was everywhere. And I think that really knocked people's confidence about going to a multi-day festival, going to a camping festival. And to be honest, probably social media too. TikTok didn't exist, a few years ago, and people's experiences in some of that were everywhere. So I think, it's just easier to get those viral moments of a bad experience, which of course has a knock-on impact. And I think just that wet weather, people were just wanting to get back to festivals, and it was kind of is this the climate change impact on things now? Is this what we're kind of getting used to? And I think it'll take a bit for people to go have a good experience and be this isn't the norm, or what's going to be happening all the time.
Yeah, I actually personally was at that Splendour in the grass in 2022, and to be honest, we actually had a really good time, besides obviously the rain and stuff. But besides that first day,
camping.
Yeah, we were camping as well. Our campsite, we're actually really fortunate. We had our campsite only started getting flooded as it stopped raining. But we found a campsite we walked past, and they were just their tents were basically floating.
Yeah.
It was awful. And again, we had a good time, but I think there was so much, I guess I said trauma in a light way, that every time that we would go to a festival afterwards and we'd see the rain forecast, we would legit just be terrified, just because we've experienced what we have at Splendour. So anytime we'd see rain or any sort of even drop of rain, we just try to be setting everything up to make sure that we don't get flooded and stuff like that. So I think it had an effect on people's mentality going into any festival, even if there is any sort of weather change.
Yeah, totally. And I though Splendour particularly probably is a lot of people's first festival too. So if they were, hadn't been to one before COVID, that was their sort of first one back. Just the flow-on impacts I don't think we can fully measure, but is clearly, showing up in poor ticket sales and just, poor confidence around.
I think the media might have also sort of inflated how bad Splendour was in 2022 in our opinion, because from the media made it seem like we were literally living in
Yeah.
underwater basically. But yes, the rain was horrible and people definitely got screwed over with the rain and the whole situation, people coming late and stuff like that. But I think the media played a very important role in how people perceived it, because our parents were calling us and saying like, oh my God, are you okay? Like, are you swimming? Are you swimming? I'm like, we're actually just walking in gumboots. Like, there's a bit of mud here and there. But it's an experience in I guess if you've been to a festival before, it's just another experience. But as you said, because it's someone's first festival, it could have completely deterred them from ever attending a festival again, especially during the sort of middle of the year period where it's a bit wetter. But yeah, I think that was, as you said, the first one out of COVID, and people were sort of excited to get back out there. And that festival was postponed for what, 2.5 years? 3 years. People were just like eager to get out there, and then it just got absolutely smashed. And then people got deterred from it. How have you sort of seen what has been the flow-on effect since that Splendor?
Well, I think
sort of in the greater sphere of festivals, not just for Secret Sound.
There was like others that also got impacted by rain, so I think just that whole season kind of did have a bit of a flow-on impact. But we've just seen, just people not buying tickets as early, and I think because people aren't buying tickets as early, they're available right up until sometimes the week of the festival, and it's kind of shifted the expectations of everyone. They're like, oh, I can wait till the week of, check the weather forecast, and then make my decision. Yeah, which from a promoter's perspective, like our members, like that just puts so much anxiety in their plans and their organising, and just like whether they're gonna have enough money to cover their costs, because you're making assumptions around how many people are going to be on site. So you've got enough infrastructure, whether that's toilets or food or just, campsites and that, for like 15,000, say, is your capacity. And then if only less than 10 turn up, like that has a huge impact on people. So I think that has really like impacted everyone. Organisers not being able to expect that their events are going to sell out within an hour or a couple of days, and having to wait until the week of, it's it just makes them like worry about the risk that they're taking. And because a lot of people didn't earn any money during COVID, and if you had a bad festival the first time you came back, you're kind of wearing some debt there that, like, if you're looking at not selling out again, you sort of can understand why they're making the decision to be like, oh, maybe it's just too much of a risk. But having said that, like there are some bright spots. Like we have seen particularly electronic festivals, but even country music, they've been selling really well. I think festivals that people went to where they weren't impacted by the weather, those ones have sort of, people had a good time and they kept going back. But yeah, it's just not really consistent, which I think is really hard from a planning perspective, and from like the industry perspective. It's hard to sort of talk to the rest of the music industry, but also talk to government around how they can help us rebuild when it is kind of, not the same experience across the board for all organisers. Yeah.
Touch on that point of like ticket sales and having people buy tickets a lot later. Pre-COVID, tickets were any festival was getting sold out within the first few hours, or right on pre-sale basically, it was getting sold out. And obviously there was still general admission tickets and stuff, because I remember that, again, going back to that Splendor, we bought those tickets in 2019 or 2020.
Yeah,
and that sold out. That sold out straight away, because that was before the whole COVID and stuff happened like that. But I think the whole people buying tickets later is a weird phenomenon. Do you think festivals can sort of since that's sort of like the trend and the people are doing now? Because obviously Splendor, the one that just went and got cancelled, they pulled the plug because they didn't get enough tickets with ticket sales within the week. Should festivals start expecting tickets to get sold later, or is that too much of a burden and cost for them to run that risk?
Well, it's just the uncertainty. So, like, you hope that your event's going to sell out, but there are certain decisions you've just got to make around, okay, well, how much are we planning for? You've got to book all your suppliers in, and you kind of can't say to, people who are coming to set the stages up, or, anything that goes into it, toilets, fences, all of that. You can't sort of a couple of weeks out be like, oh, actually we don't need half of the equipment that you said. So yeah, you kind of do need to make a call earlier, but then if you're not confident that you're going to get the tickets to cover that, that's when you like in the conundrum of like, do we push through and just see how we go and potentially lose millions in some cases, or do we back ourselves and just hope that, you know, people are going to buy tickets? And I think, like, you know, there's a lot of data out there and historical sort of, you know, ticket sales info that promoters have from over the years that they can track sort of day by day, hour by hour, week by week, how their ticket sales have gone compared to previous years. And you sort of get a, like, understanding of, like, where your goal is and whether you're going to meet it. And if you're not going to, then you're like, am I up for losing 3, 5, 8, maybe more $1 million? And I think, yeah, if they've had a bad year so far or they haven't sold out previously, like it's too big of a risk.
Why do you think festivals like especially the Secret Sounds one, like Falls and Splendor, why do you think they used to be so massive? Like, as it's been referred to before, like Splendor's been the Coachella of Australia. Why do you think now they're sort of fallen off a little bit in terms of ticket sales and the hype surrounding them?
I don't think anyone like definitively knows why, but some of the like anecdotal sort of talk and reasons that have been provided like amongst the industry is like people are just looking for more genre specific festivals, so everyone has their interests and they'd rather go to an event where they can see, you know, all types of the one music, or just one type of music, or they like people just don't want that sort of a bit of everything for everyone, the multi-genre, you know, sort of big festivals. That's one of the reasons why we think that, you know, events like Splendor and Groove in the Moo struggled, and we're also seeing some of those genre-specific festivals like still sell quite well. The other thing that's sort of going well is like, I think particularly events that are around like New Year's Eve, you know, like people are still looking to go away with their mates and have a, week away and see some music there. So those are selling well. But yeah, I don't like we're hoping that so Creative Australia, the new federal government arts agency, have announced that they're going to do like research into the like broader music audience and sort of try and understand some of these factors. But yeah, I think those people looking for genre specific festivals, but also like younger people that were 18 to 24 that haven't been to a festival before and have got access to some of their favorite artists on TikTok and Instagram and socials like pretty easily and pretty consistently. You know, the lineups that they're looking for are just probably not that realistic to deliver. Particularly in Australia, it just like costs so much to get here. The Aussie dollar's not that strong at the moment too. So like if you're trying to get an artist from the UK or US, like an Australian dollar offer that might have been pretty attractive 5 years ago is just not, because the dollar's not that strong, and then they've got to like travel to get here as well. So yeah, I don't think we can definitively say why, but they're just some of the things that we're talking about. And obviously we're working with the government to try and get that research done so that we do have some like evidence base behind any changes that come out. Because I think promoters across the board, doesn't matter what kind of event they're doing, they want to like maintain an offering that people want to go to, that want to buy tickets to. So any data that they can get from the audience to sort of help shape that, they're crying out for.
Yeah, I think the multi-genres festival is a good point you bring up, because that recent Splendor lineup definitely had a bit of everything. The 3 headliners were all different genres, but I think people aren't really aren't attracted to that sort of offering anymore. And I think you mentioned Creative Australia, and they released that report recently, and electronic music was the #1 genre or the most attended festival.
Yeah,
people.
So they sort of, all of the festivals that were surveyed and provided info for that got to like self-report all of the genres that they have at their events, and electronic was the like highest genre across the board.
By a bit as well, actually.
Pardon?
It was by a bit. Like, it was like by 10
Yeah.
or 15% more.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think that's a big one, because even if you look at Splendid and the Grass lineup, they had a lot more electronic acts offered on that lineup. But even then, it wasn't enough to push them over the line. But then you see festivals like Pitch, you see festivals like Knockout, Carnival in Melbourne, that are absolutely thriving based on that sort of electronic music thing. Is that shift been more recent, or has that always been a sort of steady trend where electronic music festivals are more, there's more of them offered?
I think there's always been some level of electronic music at a festival. So I think, there's probably some element of the data that if someone's got a DJ on at some point in their festival, they'll self-report that they have electronic music on. So it probably is skewed a bit in that sense. But I think the success and the size of electronic music festivals at the moment, you mentioned like Knockout and Pitch, they are selling really well. Like, they're one of the highlights, the bright spots, especially coming out of COVID. And I think it is just because that's the type of event that people are looking for. But they've also got really dedicated communities that they'll buy tickets because they know that they're good operators, or that they know what the space is going to be like, or that their mates want to go, and they're sort of really invested into building those communities around those events too, which that's not to say that the big multi-genre ones didn't. I just think that people's tastes are changing, and we're probably just going to see a lot more electronic events, because I think from what I've seen, even just attending events myself, that if you're sort of under 30, even under 25, most of the people are going to see the electronic artists at festivals.
Yeah, big time. It's funny because electronic music sort of has a stigma of higher usage of drugs and more reckless behavior and sort of, I guess, violent behavior, which I think, again, the media has played a big part in doing that, which is sort of, how does that affect the electronic music landscape? Because they're so popular, they also have that stigma behind them, which means they're probably going to get over policed, or there's going to be stricter security regulations and stuff like that for them. How can sort of promoters within the electronic music scene that are running festivals not avoid those costs, but be prepared to sort of face those issues with sort of security and policing?
Yeah, I think it's 100% the case. We've definitely seen whether they're club nights or festivals, anything that's got sort of electronic dance music have been targeted, both from liquor licensing but also by police. And there's just no evidence or data to back up that they're more unsafe, or that they've got a higher risk from illicit drug use, or so I think, it's sort of just a cultural thing. There has been a sort of going after, young people's events for at least since the sort of 70s and 80s, when, sort of electronic music popped off and young people were sort of going to those events, that they were targeted by police. I think in some weird sort of unexpected way, that the strength and success and how well electronic music events are going now is probably going to have a good impact on the whole industry, or that sort of genre, because police and the government and the community will realise that it's actually really popular, and people are going, and they're selling tickets, and maybe it's got a wider interest, and it's kind of is too big to really try and shut down now. So I hope that there is some realisation that they're not, electronic music has never equaled drug taking. There's a whole range of data out there that says that there's been consistent amounts of sort of illicit drug use across the community. It's not people that just go to music festivals. It's just been a sort of low hanging fruit for sort of police and those agencies to sort of come after. But I think the success will hopefully mean that we'll see like some of the organisers have been in the space for a while now. They've got really good relationships with those agencies too, so they've been able to develop those connections and working relationships over a number of years now, and I think that will hopefully elevate it for everyone. But it's going to take time, and I think it's up to us, the industry association, but also the organisers to sort of do the extra work to sort of talk about the positives of the industry and the benefits and the success that Australian electronic artists are making, and they're following around the world, and the amount of tickets that they're selling and their success from even just comparing them when it comes to their sales and Spotify numbers and all of that. It's kind of on us to talk about the positives and change the public perception of the genre and those events too.
What's the sort of, how's that positive message being received in sort of, because you've spoken with obviously AFA's sort of a representative body within government, and you've spoken at some Senate inquiries and stuff like that. What's sort of their response to the drug environment and the sort of positive outcomes of the electronic music scene, but also what's the sentiment around drug use within government at the moment? The regulation of drug laws are at the state and territory level, so it actually really depends where you are in the country. There's decriminalisation, for example, of all small rates of possession of illicit drugs in the ACT. They also have pill testing or drug checking services. So that's probably on a harm minimisation or sort of, when it comes to what do you call it, decriminalisation side, that's one side, and then most of the other states and territories that still have some level of legalization. What do you call it? Drugs are all still criminalised, and Queensland's the only other jurisdiction that has sort of a pill testing or drug checking service, which we are constantly having this discussion around, are we trying to reduce the harms of drug use of some people that choose to use them? People have been experimenting with drugs for millennia now. I don't think we're going to rule it out as a society. The sort of just say no attitude just doesn't work, and we haven't seen huge increases in drug use. It's been pretty consistent for the last couple of decades, but there are also some people experiencing severe harm from it, ending up in ICU or dying from some experiences. And yes, some of those experiences has been when they've been at a festival, but I think we just need to have a conversation as a community with government around are we just trying to reduce the harm of these drugs on young people? And if we are, if that's the threshold question that we've passed, then there are things that we can do to make sure people are safe and have the healthcare support that they need. So I think there's been numerous coroner's reports and even a Royal Commission here in New South Wales to say that drug detection dogs and strip searching young people that they think are in possession of drugs actually encourages harmful use of them, ingesting before they see them, and trying to avoid criminal penalties. And then if they don't feel safe enough to seek medical care because they're worried that they're going to get in trouble, then we see harm from that too. And
police and organisers and the community all need to be on the same page around, okay, what are we trying to do here? And here's a suite of measures. I think you see a whole lot of sort of public opinion polls, and the community's actually a lot further along in support of harm minimisation than our elected representatives or law enforcement are, which is really disappointing because, they're there to serve the people that put them in there. So, if they sort of back it in, then why aren't we doing it? But, this is a global conversation that, they're having everywhere, and it's more of a, moral discussion than a evidence-based sort of clear-headed one too.
I think if you look at the evidence, a lot of the times when you introduce harm reduction measures, it actually does reduce even the intake of drugs, or the quantity of drugs that are getting taken. Do you think the current government's doing enough to promote harm reduction at festivals and sort of even not even festivals, but just in general in terms of drugs?
In New South Wales or?
New South Wales, I think, is in particular, because I think since the sort of Gladys government, it's been very, very strict here.
Yeah.
So, do you think the current government is doing enough to revert those laws? And also, do you think they're doing enough to promote harm reduction?
So we were formed in response to those, crackdown by Gladys Berejiklian, but then in response they brought in the Music Festivals Act, which has been in place since 2019. The current government, the new Minns Labor government, are reviewing that act as we speak. So we put submissions in which were due late last year. We're still waiting to see what the proposed way forward is so that we can comment on that. But I think that will go a long way to sort of just not demonising certain festival organisers that have had experiences of people having issues with either ending up in ICU from drugs or alcohol, or having a death at their festival, which was sort of the threshold for being caught up by this legislation. So it's been a positive that they committed to reviewing the act. They just brought forward the review. It was already going to happen, but but the other side is, I think the community is dying out calling for a conversation around pill testing and decriminalisation and all of those health-based harm reduction measures when it comes to drugs. And the current government has committed to holding what they call a drugs summit. And it's supposed to be this year. We're waiting for the Premier to announce a date. All the talk at the moment is it'll be in October. And I think since they got elected last year, they've pointed to the drug summit as the place for all of these conversations to happen. So they've kind of kicked it down the road until that event, and that'll hopefully bring a whole bunch of medical experts, doctors that work in that space, and there's endless amounts of research and evidence to show what the safest and most the measures that reduce harm are, and that summit will make recommendations to government, and then we'll wait to see what the government does. So there's a few hoops to jump through, and I think given the sort of public conversation and what the media response is, will have a huge impact on that. But at least there's something that we can participate in and try and advocate for changes, because the current sort of very over the top law and order, just say no approach is only resulting in more harm, and I don't think anyone wants to see that.
Yeah, of course. And in that summit, will that be mainly just industry professionals, sort of health professionals, people like yourself and the AFA? Yeah,
so we're have been told by the government that the AFA will be there and a couple of festival organisers, which is we're really positive about. But it will mainly be a conversation in the sort of health sector and with legal experts, really. So people that understand our current criminal justice system and some of the challenges of people that use drugs and the ways that the government and the law currently responds to them, and how it can be changed. So we will be part of the discussion, but festivals and music will not be like the center of it. I think just from a media perspective, there's obviously just a lot of attention whenever there is an overdose or arrests or even deaths at events that has sort of drawn the parallels between drug use and music festivals, which we find is pretty unhelpful, but has also meant that like we have to be part of the conversation. And I think those questions around pill testing and drug checking are definitely like top of the agenda for the summit, but that's only like one suite of a whole other things. Decriminalisation, sort of needle and syringe programs, like drug checking outside of a festival context for everyone that uses drugs. There's some really, really like in-depth discussions that'll have to occur. So I think it's a sort of wait and see, but the process has been set. So
will there be any conversations about how police conduct themselves on the ground at sort of events where drugs are present?
Yeah, well, I think
regarding like police dogs, for example.
Definitely, you can't really have a conversation about drugs and drug law reform, and how we as a society sort of approach that without having police at the table, and also like in agreement with the approach, right? Because we can have all of the like policies and recommendations around like reducing harm, particularly at festivals, but if police aren't on board and the law hasn't been changed, then they'll obviously just continue the way that they see fit. So we've all got to like have this conversation and come on this journey. And I think the threshold question for me is like, are we all trying to reduce the harm and like, ensure that people stay safe and stay alive? And if that's the case, then there is no shortage of evidence out there and measures that we can implement to ensure that. But it's going to take some changes to the laws. It's going to take some changes to policing practices. And it's going to need investment in services by the government. But it's a big, broad discussion. Step
in the right direction, though, from what I'm hearing. Is there any other sort of initiatives that you've sort of seen that with this recent government that have sort of made you confident for the future regarding festivals?
Oh, yeah, definitely. So when it comes to music, like the current New South Wales government has announced a huge injection of funds. So they've promised $103 million into music over 4 years. So that started in last July. They've set up a contemporary music office within the government, which, we've seen South Australia and Victoria have one of them for, 10 years and almost 10 years respectively. The Commonwealth government's just set up a music office. So it's positive, but New South Wales definitely has the most investment attached to it. But there was probably the greatest need here as well too, because of the decline and because of the impact of lockout laws and the festival regulations, and just the approach of police to music has just really quite decimated the scene, and we've lost so many venues. So the money is gonna be used pretty easily to sort of at least just bring us back from the decline that we've seen. And that's started to happen, which is really positive. I think we're advocating for that funding. We're yet to see what the festival-specific bits of it are. So we're keen for the government to sort of shed more light on it. But I think just the fact that there is that amount of funding available, is a really positive step. And I think it just will hopefully mean that we don't see artists leaving New South Wales to go to other jurisdictions. I think, for 10 years we see a whole bunch of people moving to Melbourne because the funding programs were there, the, spaces were there to play. and that builds a vibrant music community, right? Like people then start collaborating with each other and they set themselves up in those cities, and it's kind of harder to entice them back. But, funding and, rebuilding will go a long way to do that. And hopefully, the next up and coming artists and promoters and, label execs and that want to work and be in music won't leave Sydney because it's all too hard. And yeah, that's what I'd like to see some of this funding sort of at least achieve. Yeah.
Through your conversations with different government officials and bodies and all those conversations back in there,
artists and promoters, and
do they understand the impacts that the live music scene has on the states, such as, for example, people literally leaving New South Wales just to go to Melbourne and fuel their economy, and then rather than ours? Do people within government understand the impacts of things like that and how a lacking live music culture can affect the economy of the state?
Yeah, well, I think until recently the answer would have been no. Like, I think there was a genuine lack of understanding of the industry at all amongst government, particularly in the parts of government that, we would talk to regularly, the sort of creative industries areas, but also like, the more economic development, tourism areas. And that's across the country, I'd say. The governments that have a music, development office within government, so public servants that understand the industry, that advocate for the industry within government, they're the ones that do so much better because there's that knowledge and that bridge, and the even just having someone within government who understands the industry and can sort of speak to both worlds and speak in both languages, like that changes the game entirely. And that's what we're starting to see. So yeah, South Australia set theirs up 10 years ago, Victoria not a couple of years after that, and then last year the federal government set one up, and then New South Wales. So I think they're the ones that probably have the greatest understanding of music and the benefits, and are starting to realise that if you put some funding and support towards them, the flow-on impact and the sort of exponential impact of a little bit of funding can have on a scene and even just like culture and vibrancy and venues. Like, yeah, they're starting to get it, but I would say only, particularly like here in New South Wales, only in the last 12 months. And that was partly because the new government got elected with a commitment to, reinvigorating that. There was people within the parliament who understood the benefit and, contribution that live music could make. And they won government, and then, obviously got the departments to sort of take that focus and go down that pathway, which has been transformative for us. But you do need a champion. Yeah.
So it's more of an issue regarding they sort of just don't want to hear it from someone that's not in government. Is that what you're trying to say? Like that, those agencies created are now, as you said, bridge that gap between community and then lawmakers.
Yeah.
People within government.
Well, I think the previous government, so under Dominic Perrottet and Gladys before that, they just at a elected representative level didn't have those connections into the music industry, and therefore the policy and funding and the departments were just not focused on it because they weren't sort of being told to by their ministers and by the cabinet, and that's the transformative thing that we've seen is like if you've got government policy saying we've got an interest in music, we understand the implications, then like the flow and impacts to supporting artists and venues and just growing that scene is huge. And that's why we're like talking to any government around the country who'll listen to us, particularly like the ones that don't have those structures in place. So Queensland and WA have got an election coming up later this year and early next year. The Northern Territory has one. There's some amazing work happening up in the Territory, and I think they sort of are getting there. But it's just the industry's got to get organised. Like you can't just expect government to turn around. You got to
push them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In any way you can to try and do that, which is why we need everyone, more active, more engaged. And to be honest, like we've definitely seen that, but it did take lockout laws and, cracking down on festivals and really horrible experience for people to be like, oh, we've actually got to do something about this if it's ever going to change.
How much of a role, because obviously the federal budget came out recently, and there was funding for the sort of nightlife and live music. I don't remember the figure off the top of my head. How much of a role did those established government bodies, for those creative bodies, have on that federal budget and that funding?
Yeah, well, so we were pretty integral in getting that funding committed to. I think we were really happy with the outcome because it was continuing an old program that used to be called Live Music Australia. It was $5 million a year for venues, and when the Albanese government got elected, they actually expanded it for festivals. So we were really happy about that. That was a $20 million program, so $5 million a year over 4 years, and it was running out on June 30. So we were worried that there was going to be a $5 million sort of decrease in the amount of money available for festivals and live music, and we're talking to government about that. Thankfully, we're really happy that they extended the program. They've only extended it for 1 year, so that's, not the best. We're going to have these conversations again in 12 months' time. And instead of it being $5 million a year, it's 8.6 million. So, 70% increase in the amount of funding, but $8.6 million for venues and festivals across the country, given the challenges that we find ourselves in at the moment. It's not going to be the difference between saving every festival or not, but it will go a long way to support some of them to try new things, to change their offering, to try and meet these new market conditions or audience needs. And then the only other thing, so it was really good. We're happy with that. We've been told that the new Contemporary Music Office, it's called Music Australia, they're essentially been tasked with supporting the industry going forward. We're going to work with them to see if there's longer term permanent funding options available for music, particularly festivals rather, and what that might look like and how much. So it was really good and we welcomed it, but it's only for 12 months, but which is breathing space, and everyone was really happy. But
where do you usually see those costs? Because it's 8.6 million across the board. So it's not per individual venue. It's across the whole country.
It's a pool that they can apply for. Yeah.
Where do you usually see those costs going? Where do people, when people take out the funding, where do venues and music festivals usually put that money towards? So
on the festival side, we have had members apply for a whole range of different things. If they got a venue that they use all the time and they wanted to upgrade it in a way, or put some permanent infrastructure in, they've might have applied for some funding to do that. If they want to do some new programming and they want to expand their offering, they've asked for money to pay artists, or they've got a new collaboration that they want to do, or in some cases a festival that has had a pretty good reputation, it's got a good organizer that knows what they're doing. They've had a festival going for some time. They might want to start a new event at a different time of the year or a different part of the country. They applied for that. There's a whole. It's got to support Australian contemporary music. So as long as there's some element of Australian artists that are getting platformed, you can sort of apply for anything. And similar on the venue side, obviously, but it's just a permanent space. So they might do some infrastructure capital works like soundproofing or improving the sound system in their venue so that people have a better experience and artists want to play it, or they'll put a stage in, or not sound attenuation, soundproofing, those types of things, or programming.
There's not many restrictions regarding with what you can actually.
Not for the funding.
Not for the funding.
No. It's just that you have to either be a festival or a venue that its main focus is programming contemporary music. Yeah.
Has there been any talks about, because obviously this podcast is focused a lot more on electronic music, and within the electronic music scene and within Australia, it's mainly, a lot of the time, it's a lot of promoters. Yeah. So a lot of promoters going into different venues and hosting events there. Obviously, this probably extends outside of electronic music, but is there anything that is being done to assist promoters? I think the biggest challenge from what I'm seeing and people that I've talked to is ticket sales. Yeah. And obviously venue costs, hiring out venues and stuff like that. Is there anything being done, or is there any talks about promoters getting any sort of assistance?
Yeah, well, I actually had this conversation with someone recently. I think there's definitely a case to be made to expand the offering of that funding program to people that put content into venues, so promoters. But yeah, like they like have the conversation with the government. The department hasn't set up the guidelines that usually, govern how these funds hand out money. So definitely, they should have a conversation with them. I think, particularly like small party promoters or, electronic promoters, like they're, just scraping by, or like they're just running their own businesses. They probably don't have the extra cash to fund a industry association like us. And they just don't have someone in that world advocating for them, which is, a gap in their industry. And I think that has definitely been raised in the past. But there's also this, so talk to the department to try and make that case. I would 100% support it. And, I think we were making similar cases of like, why is there a funding program available for sort of live music venues, which are, permanent bricks and mortar type venues, when, our members are also putting on live music content, but just because it's a temporary venue, we're kind of excluded from this as well. So that was the arguments that we were making, and we were successful in getting that towards the end of the previous program. And I think, there's definitely a case to be made for that around the promoter side, but the challenge you then face is there's more people that can get access to the funding. There's not heaps more funding available, so it's just gonna dilute the impact of that. But if it opens up and there's a huge demand, I think that makes the case for more money next year. So, it's all swings and roundabouts. But the other platform or option that we all have is I appeared on a Senate inquiry recently, which was established about the National Cultural Policy. It's had 2 hearings or 3 hearings maybe, and put out an interim report just before the budget, which we were really thankful for. The House of Representatives Committee on Communication and the Arts has just established an inquiry into the live music industry. So I know a bunch of party promoters have put submissions into that inquiry. So that's another way that they can come talk to Parliament, talk to the parliamentarians about some of the challenges that they're facing in the venue space and struggling to sell tickets. And I think particularly when it comes to rent, sort of venue hire, the venues that they're using are struggling too, because people aren't drinking as much. And, if alcohol sales were sort of subsidising a lot of the music programming, that's having a flow-on impact, which promoters are probably now facing around trying to or being expected to sort of, bridge some of those gaps in the funding that venues were seeing. So I think that process is definitely, where people can just raise the issue and sort of present that to the Parliament. And then, what you try and do is you get it in the committee report, and then hopefully they make recommendations around support that they can that the government, departments, should do in response to the challenges that people have turned up and told them about. So that's probably the best that they can do. And then equally, I would say that in New South Wales with the new music office, that they're probably plugged in fairly well, but we're all just waiting for this. There's a 10-year contemporary music strategy that's about to be released.
Okay.
which will sort of give us an indication around that 103 million that's been committed over 4 years, like where that's going to get spent, but then also like a bit of a pipeline for the next 10 years around, okay, where does the investment need to go, which will help them spend what they've got, but also all of us to advocate to keep getting more money from the state government. So, yeah.
There's a bit to do, but there's a lot they can do now, but there's also a lot of work to do for the future. That sort of program you were saying where people can come and speak to Parliament regarding the party promoters, that's still currently going on?
So their submission date has closed, but my understanding is that the committee will still accept submissions if people put one in. So if you go onto the Australian Parliament House website and you search for the House of Representatives Committee on Communication and the Arts, they're only doing one inquiry at the moment. It's an inquiry into the national live music industry. You can go onto that website and it has all the details where you can put a submission in. And then after you've done that, just get in touch with the committee staff to be like, I've put a submission in, and if you'd like to, like say, can I appear before the public hearings of the committee and, present your case, which I think, there's a number of people across the industry that'll be doing that. My understanding, and it hasn't been outlaid yet, but they're going to do hearings around the country. So,
regarding just music?
Yeah, just live music.
Oh, live music, okay. Is that just one inquiry, or are they planning to do multiple inquiries within the one state?
Oh, so the inquiry's like the whole issue. So the committee they're going to be like, we're going to talk to the live music industry for a bit. We're going to go around the country and talk to all bits of the live music industry. While they collect that evidence, afterwards, the committee staff at the Parliament then go, oh, these are all the things that people said, and they write up a report saying these are the issues that the Federal Parliament Committee on Communications of the Arts found, and they'll make recommendations. So the members of Parliament that are on that committee will write a list of recommendations and be like, the Department of the Arts should, expand the live music funding to include, party promoters or, whatever it is that they hear. And then that, report from the inquiry has to be responded to by government within, I think it's, 30, 60, 90 days or something. There's a period of time. So the department actually has to be like,
action up.
Yeah, it's like, this is our response to each individual recommendation. So it is like a accountability and, but you do the amount of committee inquiries that have made lots of recommendations that still haven't been implemented on any issue. So that's when it turns back on the industry to be like, this inquiry found this ages ago. Where is it up to? You said in your response you're not going to do this, but we don't agree with you, and there should be. So it is a bit never ending sometimes, but that's a democracy.
Yeah. This podcast will come out in early August, so I think at that point everything will be completely closed.
It may be closed, but the hearing still may be occurring. So the other option, if people want to get involved, is watch the hearings, turn up, go and see what other people are saying, or you can keep a track of who's appearing, and if you know them, it's a pretty small industry if you work in music, just talk to them about some of the issues that you're facing or that you're interested in, and see if they'll present your issues to the committee. But my understanding from, I went down to Canberra for the budget and was talking to some of the members that were on the committee, they'll do the hearings in July, August, maybe later, and then have the report out hopefully by the end of the year, I believe, because the election's coming up. So, they'll hopefully want to have that out before the Parliament sort of gets shut down before the election.
Yeah. A question that I actually have regarding elections and everything like that. In your view, if a Liberal government does get re-elected back into the sort of state government, is there a fear of everything that's sort of been done by the current government with the funding and the promotion and all that sort of stuff, that being completely regressed due to the sort of, I guess, attitude and mentality of the Liberal government? Or are these sort of things that will sort of stay regarding disregarding what government's
Yeah. Like there is a huge risk that they could get wound back. Like any government can, undo any, program, policy, piece of legislation. They've obviously got to get it through the parliament. When it comes to the federal office, that has actually been legislated. So the federal music development office called Music Australia is legislated. So if the Liberals got elected at the federal election, they'd have to get that through the Senate, if they didn't have the numbers. So I would like to think that the industry would have enough support in the parliament to ensure that didn't happen. That hasn't happened at the state level. I'm not sure if it's the intention of the government to legislate that. That's obviously the way that you can protect things most easily, but also, it only takes a deal in the parliament, to wind back these things. I would like to think that history will show sort of what's happened when it comes to governments in the past. It's really unlikely that a one-term government, sort of gets thrown out. So we would maybe see Labor stay in power for at least 2 terms at the state or federal level. And then when you're getting into sort of either 6 years at the federal level or 8 years at the state level, and if these programs are got really good outcomes, the money's going in there and there's money being pumped into the sector, it is hard to then pull that money back because there'll be, a lot of public media attention around the cancellation of funding or the withdrawal of it. So, I think the longer these programs are in place and the more evidence we have to their success, the harder it is to roll them back. But if in a, world where the Liberals get in the state or federal level, it's definitely a possibility, which is why we as a community and industry need to stay vigilant and stay across it and remind them that we know exactly, what funding's available to us, and if they're going to move on it, we're going to make sure that everyone knows, and that we'll, do a lot of media around, anything that they try to reduce, and then all political parties have just got to make that decision around whether they want the
public outcry,
the pain of exactly wearing that, which is usually a no. And it's when you've got music artists or people with big lists or big social media followings, you kind of don't want to annoy them.
I guess in that, following on from that, how can people get involved locally to support? I know we're sort of diverted from the festivals and now we're sort of talking about live music in general, which is still a good conversation, but how can people sort of get locally involved? I think a question that I received was people that want to work in the industry, the live music industry, because it's such a rocky future, uncertain future. How can people still get involved in the live music industry with confidence?
I wish I could say that it was, a really stable, safe sector to work in, but I think COVID exposed that it's not, and that's really disappointing. I think that, I'll say, you're not going to have much more fun anywhere else than you are when you're working in the music industry. When I go to a gig or a festival and you turn around and you look at people's faces and the amount of joy and happiness that's on them, and you sort of realize that you kind of get paid to work in this space and sort of help make those moments for people. You can't, personally, I can't, beat that feeling. And, that's definitely what makes me keep coming back. But there's also so many different ways that you can get involved in music, whether you're an artist or whether you work closely with artists, whether that's in management or an agent or at a label. There's so many different options from a role perspective. Find your niche and find your interests and go and follow that, and back yourself. If you're good at what you do and you like it, you're probably going to be okay in the long term. Hopefully there's not another pandemic or something that's going to stop live music, because I think that's just out of our control, and that would put people in a bit of a precarious situation. We saw some people sort of not get JobKeeper because of the way that their businesses were set up, and if they're a sole trader or didn't sort of fit the criteria of what a sort of full-time worker was, then they missed out. I would like to think that given the outrage that occurred last time, that if there was any sort of similar setup where government was intervening to that level, that artists and music workers wouldn't be deliberately cut out. But and I think there's start these conversations. I'm up for it amongst the industry to talk about how we can give people more certainty. But in festival world particularly, we need people to buy tickets and to enable our events to happen, because that ensures that people who work on music events and festivals are able to have a job. So it's kind of encourage people to buy tickets yourself, go and support local artists. We've all got a bit of a collective responsibility to rebuild the confidence. But I just say don't be dissuaded from working in music or going for it because of the precarity. We're not the only industry that has probably a precarious situation. If you like it and you're interested and you're good at it, I'm sure you'll be able to find a way through it. And if not, there's plenty of people that have probably faced challenges that you have before that can help you through it. Everyone's pretty supportive of each other. There's a lot of strong bonds, and join your union.
Oh yeah, that's one thing. Yeah, I was going to ask, is there any people who can submit inquiries or submit feedback either to yourself at the AFA or at a local level, or is it mainly just sort of at the state and federal level where people can get involved and submit different pieces of information and feedback?
Yeah. Well, definitely those parliamentary inquiries. Every state and territory has a music organisation. So here in Sydney, it's Music New South Wales. There's the equivalent in every state and territory. So Music Vic, Q Music, so on and so forth. They're probably the ones that are most plugged into, the communities within their states at the more grassroots level, I guess, but also have the relationships with some of the, businesses and that. A lot of local community radio stations are really plugged in. So, whether it's FBI or PBS, Triple R, Triple Z, all of those, they've got huge volunteer bases and that go to, events that are organised by local promoters. There's usually a whole bunch of people that care as much about the industry and music and artists at those events, that if you just strike up a conversation, the amount of great ideas that have been discovered just after a gig, having a couple of drinks or a chat with some mates or new friends, there's lots of different ways. But in terms of formally in the more advocacy side with the government, the Festival Association exists depending which bit of the industry you sort of either work or are interested in. There's equivalents for us. So, music producers and songwriters have APRA AMCOS. The record labels have their own through ARIA, managers through the AAM, they're called. A lot of those state music orgs are plugged into these processes and inquiries as well. So it's just, if you're keen and you get your head around the issues and you've got ideas, I would say we'd love more people sort of in the space advocating, and just reach out to say hi.
Okay, awesome. I think I want to touch back on sort of the festival side of things.
Yeah.
Something that's a bit topical at the moment, especially with Pitch just gone by, and obviously we talked about Splendour in the mud from 2 years ago. Climate change. So, obviously Pitch just went by. That was a disaster. Scorching heat, fires everywhere, cancellations, all that sort of stuff. How big of an impact does climate change have on like the music festival environment?
Yeah. Well, I think like Splendor and your experience and my experience of that.
Oh, you were there as well?
Yeah. Pitch probably wasn't as big of a disaster as maybe it was reported to be. I think the experience on the ground, was varied. But yeah, there was, a lot of media attention, a lot of worried parents calling into Talkback Radio on a Saturday morning in Melbourne, which probably didn't paint the full picture. I think bushfire risk and climate change risk is a very live conversation. So you mentioned the report that came out about festivals a few weeks ago now by Creative Australia. We were like integral in getting them to do that research. We want to see the next tranche of that be around climate change and the climate impacts on music festivals around the country, because I think we can't ignore that, these things keep happening. Prior to the pandemic, we saw, Falls Festival get cancelled because of bushfires. We've seen the flooding events. We've now seen Pitch. I think, that long weekend in Melbourne over Labor Day hasn't had bushfire risk in, almost 50 years, someone put it to me. So you would think that as the Pitch organisers, and there was 4 or 5 events on that weekend, they thought it was a pretty safe bet that they wouldn't be like at risk of particularly bushfires, but, sort of any extreme weather. And that's changing with climate change. So I think we need to have an honest conversation. Like, are the spaces and areas of the country that we're holding, particularly outdoor multi-day music festivals, are they resilient enough to be able to be held consistently without a risk of cancellation because of some extreme weather event? And music festival organisers or industry association in the music space, we're not the climate scientists or experts with the knowledge to sort of decide that, at least, in the very short term. So we're currently working with a bunch of academics in the sort of sociology and climate space to try and get some funding to do another report into some of those issues that organisers are facing, and to just like bring government to the table to have the conversation. It's like, okay, if like it's in everyone's interest for events not to get cancelled, particularly the day of, like it ruins people's confidence. If you're working in this sector, you're like, is this going to keep happening? People don't want to turn up to a festival and set up their campsite for 5 days and then not, be there. So I think, everyone's invested in making sure that they're safe and actually happening. So like, let's just work out if, the stuff that we're doing now is going to set us up to continue doing it into the future. Or if not, do we need to talk about where festivals are held, like how we engage with the emergency services, how we work with the weather agencies? I think even if you're not talking about bushfires or like flooding, even just heat these days is getting worse in some cases. So, that's going to be just as big of an issue for Australian festivals as well, particularly in summertime. Yeah, we need to have the conversation. We need to have the experts at the table, and we need to have an open mind about if the recommendations are that, we've got to change the way we're doing things, then let's just put a plan in place and get on with it. Because, I think if we leave it up to the, governments around the world to try and solve climate change before we start doing this stuff, we're probably going to find ourselves in a bit of a pickle. So
we're already finding that
we just
anyway.
Exactly. We just got to get on with it.
Yeah, because it's become more unpredictable. And I think I was listening to a podcast earlier, but like the solution isn't just to make everything indoors.
No,
because that's like, I think maybe not Aussie music festival culture, but just in general, like the outdoor camping festivals is like, that's the whole sell of it. It's like you're outdoors.
I don't want to not be able to go to an outdoor festival, whether it's a single day or a few days like camping. Like we've got the space, we've got the, climate for it, but yeah, clearly there's impacts and changes that we just might need to work out, that there's probably, better spaces for us to do that, or there's like things that we can implement at our current sites to just make it a safer option.
Festivals doing enough in your opinion? Do you think festivals are doing enough to promote sustainability? Because obviously that's a big talking point, and as you would know, leaving a festival site, sometimes they look like absolute garbage, and obviously it's our land, and sometimes it's like Aboriginal land as well. How can festivals they promote that they need to get it cleaned and that everything needs to be taken with you, but that's never usually the case. A lot of people usually leave stuff at festivals. How do you see are festivals doing enough to promote sustainability?
Well, I think, I would love to see this research that we're doing include climate and sort of sustainability questions, but, getting funding to do things like that, it's just a very big piece of work, and they're actually quite different. I would say currently everyone is definitely talking about it. Everyone's aware of it. I would say there's different levels of sort of implementation of measures to, address some of the like pretty big, waste and, just like impacts, like environmental impacts from whether it's campsite waste or just like single-use plastics and all of that on site. There's lots of solutions out there for reusable crockery and drinkware and all of that. There's I think we've heard that most of the waste generated at a festival is on the campsite, so that's where you've got to have the conversations around like what people are bringing, what they're taking home with them, what they're not taking home with them, and sort of just having that conversation with them. There's an amazing organisation called Green Music Australia, which are funded by a bunch of philanthropists that are really interested and involved in the sort of climate sustainability space, who are working with a bunch of festivals to roll out some of these measures, but we do need to do it at scale across the country. And I'd love to sort of have a tool for them to, be able to refer to understand the types of things that are available to them. The problem is at the moment we were actually starting to have really good conversations about that, and then COVID hit, and it's actually
around sustainability.
Yeah, exactly. Oh. Yeah. But there's like existential questions of like, can I sell enough tickets to put, like, I know you should, like, we can all do both, but there's just a lot of, other big issues that we're facing that to try and have the sort of bandwidth and focus to, sell all your tickets, to make sure you've got an artist offering that people want to come to, set up the sustainability measures, but also, preempt and predict and get insurance for potential climate impacts. Like it's just a lot. So yeah, there's some good examples of people doing it well, which can easily be rolled out, but each event's different too. So the one thing that's beautiful about festivals is that they're really good microcosms, and like they're quite self-regulating. So like when people come to an event, there's usually the community is quite just able to enforce a set of rules and expectations around behavior and the way we treat each other, and just how we interact and move around the space, that provides it as the perfect space to have some rapid changes in the way we deal with things like waste, and actually have conversations about issues with waste in the broader community and across society, but in the context of a festival, so people can wrap their head around it and start implementing some of the practices at the festival. But actually what the likes of Green Music Australia that have found is people then take some of those knowledge back home and into the rest of their lives. And, it does have that flow-on impact. And because those festival settings just have people have put their phone down, they've like switched off for the weekend, they've committed to the event, they love the community, and they sort of want to keep it going and, enjoying themselves in that space. It does just put them in a headspace where they're like able to, learn things about the impacts of some of their, decisions and just the practices that they do when they're, if they're bringing single-use plastics, or, they're considering leaving their tents behind, or, the list could be endless. But, it's festivals are the perfect space to have that conversation. And I think I just wish we had more resources and support to be able to roll out some of these things. But that's, we're trying to find some money to be able to run these programs, and there's a lot of people in the industry that have got some amazing ideas and doing some great work. So it's just trying to get it at roll out at scale to have a huge impact.
I think like any initiative though, there's always got to be a priority list of things to sort of deal with. And I think climate change and sustainability, I'm not sure, I personally think should be high up on that list. But obviously there are other things, like if there's no festivals, and the conversation of climate change and sustainability doesn't even exist. So you've got to make sure that is sorted out and locked in before you sort of move on to those other ones. So obviously I can appreciate your work that you've done for the music festival in Australia, and obviously the conversations that you've had, and then your board members and then your members in general have had to sort of promote, especially coming out of COVID, since it's been so rocky and completely unstable. Like there's sort of been, I think this conversation, anyone that's listening, there might be a bit of light at the end of the tunnel.
I hope so.
100%. That's what I've gotten. But I've also gotten from this conversation that it's a lot more multifaceted than I initially thought it was. There's so many different areas, and they're also intertwined, but they're also siloed as well in their own respective ways. But thank you for coming on.
No, thanks for having me.
It's been an amazing conversation. Hopefully everyone has gotten something out of this conversation. I know people, I said earlier to you on Instagram, were very much keen that this episode was getting recorded, so hopefully everyone got something out of it. And obviously thank you to Mitch for coming on. But if you guys enjoyed it, please share around, like and subscribe, follow us on Spotify and rate us there. I'll leave a link to the sort of AFA in the description as well, and any sort of support material that you guys can get involved in, or anything you can read up on just to sort of get involved and show support to the live music scene that we all love. But
and buy a ticket to the next festival you're thinking about going to.
Exactly. Or even just your local
totally
event. If you can't afford a festival ticket, just go to your local event. But thank you, Mitch, and thank you everyone for listening and watching. Take care.
See ya.